Welcome back to AP World History and Mr. Leveridge. This is going to be Unit 1, Day 10. Reminders to please have out your history notebook and you're taking notes as you move through the video. And make sure that you complete the vocabulary for this video located down in the description and on the next slide. So let's go ahead and get started. So our key terms for today are going to be Zheng He, the Avignon Papcy, the 100 Years' War, the Black Death, secular, Italian Renaissance, Northern Renaissance, the Reconquista, Prince Henry the Navigator, the Vivaldi Brothers, and Hacienda. Developments by 1450, Western Europe developments by 1450, and the Renaissance and exploration. Now, this is really kind of the end of the post-classical period. This is going to be the end of the Old Order. With the collapse of the post-classical state, just as the Byzantines conquered in 1453 by the Ottoman Turks, and the Abbasid Caliphate collapsing, conquered by the Mongols, and the Ottomans arose, the end of the Song dynasty, the decline of the Yuan dynasty, the beginning of the Mughal empires, the kind of resurgence of Italian culture and Italian Renaissance. This is truly the end of the old orders. In Southwest Asia, Muslim leaders begin to exert controls. Rationalism is opposed by religious conservatives. The pursuit of science declines. Landlords exercise greater authorities. Peasants reduced to borderline slavery and serfdom. Europeans challenge the Arab dominance of trade and even control of the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean Europeans use control with the rise of the Aragon, Castile, Venice, and the French. And European merchants began to replace many of the Muslim merchants as the Middle East becomes less the center of trade and the center of kind of power, the center of the world in terms of trade routes. Now, this also leads to an international power vacuum. With the Ottoman empires, the sultans did not restore the Muslim dynasties and Muslim control to the same level as before. The Ottomans were not the center of international trade. Science and philosophy are going to stagnate. This results in a power vacuum, meaning that there should be all this power here, and there's suddenly not. That's a power vacuum. And the Mongols provided an alternate framework, right? They're going to redirect land trade away from the Muslims. So they'll just bypass the Muslims going through, say, Russia and down into Europe, or just by sea trade. And with the advances in maritime technology and the introduction of European dominance in sea trade and trade, the Muslim Middle East becomes kind of irrelevant in the global scale of trade, leading to kind of problems and strife and, kind of reverting back to kind of very traditional conservative values in the Middle East. Now, for the Chinese, the Ming Dynasty is going to drive out the Mongols in 1368. And the Ming emperors sought expansionism. They revived the tribute system. They initiate self-sponsored maritime expeditions, with the most important being Zheng He, which from 1405 to 1433 is going to kind of explore all from China all the way to Africa and the Middle East and India, and set up trade routes and attempt to create kind of little baby tribute empires that become tribute to China. There's even some reports, though kind of unsubstantiated at this point, that Zheng He even made it to the Americas. But again, that is unconfirmed, and it's just kind of speculative. Right? But at the same time, they ordered the voyages to stop in 1433. This is due to, I believe, civil war, and they become kind of closed off. And even these very elaborate ships that were extremely efficient and big and carried lots of cargo will be destroyed, and we won't know how they were created until very recently, and even then we can't figure out quite how they've managed to stay afloat or anything. And this is going to kind of signal China's withdrawal from the world into isolationism. Now, Europe at the end of the post-classical period, we have the Avignon Papacy from 1309 to 1377. This is when the Pope moves to France, but in Rome, where the Pope is originated from, he's Another pope is elected, meaning that there's now two popes, which doesn't work because that pope over there is going to be like, I'm the pope, and then that pope over there is going to be like, I'm the pope, and it just doesn't work. This thus causing kind of Catholicism and Christianity to kind of break for about 100 years. At the same time as this is going on, suddenly we got the Black Death and the Black Plague and the bubonic plague, all the same thing, showing up. This is called the Great Dying. Again, we learned that it starts in China and kind of spread through fleas and rats. It spreads through the Silk Road, and it killed between 50 and 200 million in Western Europe. This kind of ended serfdom because you don't have enough people to continue the serfdom and continue feudalism. And this is going to completely destroy the social structure of Western Europe, which causes them to have to kind of rebuild it. Again, at the exact same time as the bubonic plague is happening and Christianity is getting broken, we have the 100 Years' War between Europe and between England and France. This is going to be when Edward III claims the French throne, and a series of war between England and France. England winning at first because of the longbow, but new technology such as cannons and guns start to kind of even it out. Kings start to create their own armies, which leads to the death of feudalism. France eventually wins and kind of pushes England out of Western Europe, with the exception of a small area of Colossus. But again, there's so much happening in Western Europe right now. You got death, you got a broken Christianity, they're fighting, right? It leads to kind of a wanting to kind of expand outside of Europe, because they really start to realize that, hey, trying to take anything in Europe is going to cause a lot of death and pain, right? So they want to kind of start to expand outside of Europe. Right? And by the 15th century, the West begins to want to expand its world context. Due to the church being under attack, political organization and feudalism not working, the impact of the Black Death kind of wiping out 1/3 of the European population, leading to the decline of serfdom, they really want to get out of Europe. They want to establish context outside of Europe. They want to establish colonies and things, so they make sure that their power stays their power. They don't want one event to wipe out their entire power in Europe. Well, this also leads to kind of a rebirth of thoughts, especially broken death, right? Broken Christianity, two popes, right? This leads to the Italian Renaissance, which begins in Italy in the beginning of the 1300s of the 14th century. They turn away from medieval culture. They start to have a more secular, non-religious outlook on art and literature. And they're really going to start to recopy kind of the older Rome and Greek art and architecture in order to kind of bring back that kind of thoughts and science and philosophy. This is also a period of cultural innovation and individualism, a concentration on arts, music, literature, known as the humanities. They're going to embrace more of a realistic secular style. Classical architecture forms replace the Gothic, Dark Ages, right? They tend to idealize Rome and Greece, right? Really not for their politics and their kind of social structure or anything like that, but more of their art and literature. Initially, the Renaissance is really limited to Italy. It does spread to France, England, the Netherlands, and Germany, and this is what's called the Northern Renaissance. And this also kind of changes the way people view the Bible. They view the Bible as more important as themes rather than the actual word, which will cause some discontent between, different aspects of Christianity, different denominations. Right? Again, the early expansion's going to start with Castile, which Aragon's going to unite by marriage in 1469. They're finally going to push the last remnants of the Moors and the Muslims out of Iberia by 1492, the last bit of the Reconquista. And exploration is really going to begin in the 1200s or the 13th century, with early explorations by the Vivaldi Brothers. They begin to explore the Atlantic. In the 14th century, Genoese will discover the Canary Islands with the development. There's also it's easier to navigate due to the development of new technology, better ships such as brigs and frigates, more seaworthy vessels such as we have the introduction of the compass from China, the astrolabe kind of saved by the Chinese and Muslim merchants and kind of brought back to Europe. And of course, many more technologies such as lantine sails and paper from China. And Europeans really start to discover and explore. So European explorers really start to kind of become very prominent. And for the most part, Portugal is going to dominate this kind of Indian Sea trade and kind of exploring and discovering things, or discovering things because they're European. It's already been there. And even so, Prince David the Navigator, he's going to build a school and send out ships, and they're going to penetrate even further into the Atlantic and explore the African coast, and eventually get to the Indian Ocean, where the Europeans are really going to stake their claim and really start causing issues. So again, we talked about the Reconquista. So it starts all the way in 722, and as you see, as time goes on, they push more and more of the Moors or the Muslims out of Spain until 1492, when they finally push them fully out. Right? Colonization follows exploration. The Spanish and Portuguese are the big first colonizers. Not only will they be some of the first to discover the Americas, they'll also be the first to set up colonies in the Indian Ocean, and Africa and India and Indonesia and places like that. And when they show up, the Europeans' diseases kill off the natives. So they're like, hey, my God wiped out your people so I could live here, right? That's the kind of mentality the Europeans begin to have. The Europeans try to enslave the natives, but most of them die off. And all of these kind of plantation colonies are designed to produce commercial crops. Sugar, cotton, and tobacco became popular crops. Iberian settlers imported African slaves to create the Hacienda style of plantations and the Hacienda model of exploitation, which we'll get into more next unit. So outside this kind of European network and kind of outside of what we've talked about, the Americas haven't been discovered yet. They won't be discovered until 1492, which is right at the end of the post-classical period. Polynesia, for the most part, maintains its kind of independence and solidarity. Most of sub-Saharan Africa kind of remains unaffected by early expansion, but they will see more influence from Europeans in other places as we move forward in the course. So that's where we're going to end for our unit 1. So please make sure you are following along with the notes. You're completing the vocabulary. And guys, I'll see you in class. Y'all have a great day.